but we really started building that into the software to enable residents to do that themselves. So for residents to create their own book clubs, for residents to create their own board game groups, for residents to help other neighbors and do in a way that was kind of crowdsourced, right? That was organic. So our communities in Austin, Texas are completely different than our communities in South Florida, completely different than our communities in, Georgia. Every community on Cobu is unique in that way. What's not unique is the kind of attributes and pillars to how community building happens. So that's kind of the same. Obviously, the platform that delivers it is the same, but the actual content, the actual groups, the actual ways that residents engage with the neighbors, I mean, it couldn't be more unique.
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Ben Pleat is the CEO and co-founder of Cobu, a real estate technology company that is a leading community building platform for multifamily. Cobu is in over 85 cities and 36 states. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam, for having me. Appreciate you guys reaching out.
Absolutely, Ben. The pleasure is mine. There are 3 questions I ask every guest who comes on the show in 90 seconds or less. Can you tell me, where did you start, where are you now, and how did you get there?
Yeah, we started Cobu in Massachusetts. My background's in multifamily. We were just in one city in one state for about a year, and we expanded now to about, like you said, 36 states, about 85 cities. And a lot of that's been growth with our current customers who brought us to more parts of their portfolio. And we're in far as wide as places as California. We were in Canada as well. We're in Texas, and we're still based technically in Massachusetts. We have teammates all across the US in 8 states. So serving a good portion of the country.
That is awesome. I want to hear the kind of that process, how you were able to scale that. Obviously, that's in very strong keeping with the show. But before we get there, I want to hear kind of the backstory on why. What caused you to found Cobu?
Yes, I'm one of the co-founders here at Cobu. So Cobu really came from more of a personal experience. My background's in multifamily property management. I worked for a small mom and pop property manager in the New York area and really kind of learned the industry there. But I would say the impetus or spark for Cobu came from more of a personal experience, Sam, which was seeing my mom achieve her lifelong dream, which was to live in the city. She immigrated to the States in the 80s and finally achieved this dream of living in the city in the thicket of it all. Moved to a beautiful building with amazing roof deck, all the amenities that you'd expect, right? American dream come true.
Yeah.
Visit her and basically see her cooped up alone. She couldn't be a single person, and it took a really big toll on her. And she is like the most social, most gregarious, extroverted person you'll ever meet. And she couldn't do that in her home. And I looked into the ocean, realized this was 61% of the US, according to Cigna, bigger issue for younger people, for millennials, and for Gen Z. And frankly, kind of ironic, right? That we're more digitally connected than ever before. And yet as human beings, more disconnected. And COVID obviously didn't make any of that better. And we realized that this is something that we can help deliver. And along the way, I realized this actually can solve one of the things that I struggled with as a property manager, which was losing 30 to 60% of my residents every year. So roughly half my properties would leave turnover-wise.
Sure.
And it's a big issue. And realized one of the best ways to build stickiness was to build more points of attachment. And we found that when you drive that strong community engagement, it's not just something that a resident wants. It's actually something that can help drive stronger a bunch of other ways, but retention being one key primary driver. And that was the kind of initial impetus for Cobu, which is all about empowering people to feel that sense of belonging and helping owners drive stronger community engagement, retention, and ultimately NOI.
Yeah. Okay. So walk us through. Because it's one thing to say, okay, here's how we as real estate investment firm X are going to drive engagement. We're going to do these things. Here's our blueprint. This is what we're going to go out to do to create community events. This and that, the other. I don't know. I mean, all the different things probably that you've already thought long through, but it's another thing, I think, entirely to say we're going to create a model that then can be replicated across anyone's property. I think that's a different ball of wax there. So tell me, what are some of the things that you guys think through, maybe from a more just nuts and bolts level on that community engagement side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of what we're trying to do is, in a fully moderated, kind of fully safe environment, enable residents to connect with their neighbors and create, great community that drives that stickiness. So think of it as a running club, a mom group, a foodie group, marketplace, buying, selling, trading items, giving stuff away for free, local recommendations, finding dog sitters nearby, cat sitters. Very kind of common ways that you'll see residents use Cobu. We typically specialize in typically larger properties. So we're finding like size is important. So our average size is right above 300 units. We typically recommend, 200 plus unit properties. But what we're trying to do is, in a fully safe environment via technology, enable those types of connections and to moderate everything, right? To make sure that everyone's playing nice in this sandbox and and
Right.
make it easy for the property. So we kind of do it soup to nuts, and we know how much your property managers and teams you guys are working with are going through. So a lot of the lifting is on our end. We just have a couple small best practices that the properties do, but it's really kind of how do you put that on autopilot and make it actually happen in a way that you can scale across your portfolio.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Like how did you get this off the ground? Because it's one thing again to do it for yourself. It's another thing to say, hey, here's the product, and I can then sell this product to other property managers. How did you do that?
Yeah, so today we're in about 115,000 homes, give or take.
Wow.
We started it really just doing it manually, right? We wanted to learn like how to build community in these apartment properties, right? So we literally would go to a property and like do it ourselves. We'd host an event, we'd bring a bunch of residents together, and we learned a couple things. One is that residents definitely wanted to engage with their neighbors, right? Two is we learned you had to make it really easy for the property team involved.
Mm.
And three is you have to do it in a way that can scale across a portfolio, right? You don't just want something in one property, you want it across your platform typically. So I would say once we got the learnings of how we actually build communities, there's a lot of science on this stuff as well. So we learned, like we looked at the community science out there. What are the attributes of the strongest communities? We found there are 4 typical pillars. Happy to go deeper into it if it's helpful, but we really started building that into the software to enable residents to do that themselves. So for residents to create their own book clubs, for residents to create their own board game groups, for residents to help other neighbors and do it in a way that was kind of crowdsourced, right? That was organic. So our communities in Austin, Texas are completely different than our communities in South Florida, completely different than our communities in, Georgia. Every community on Cobu is unique in that way. What's not unique is the kind of attributes and pillars to how community building happens. So that's kind of the same. Obviously, the platform that delivers it is the same, but the actual content, the actual groups, the actual ways that residents engage with the neighbors, I mean, it couldn't be more unique. Every property has a personality, and every property likes to engage around particular subjects. And sometimes it surprises you kind of what residents love engaging in. You might find there's an active, kite surfer group in a place that you wouldn't probably expect that.
Kite surfing group in a retirement community, something like that. You're like, oh, all right, cool. That's awesome. Tell me, I think that's really, really cool. I mean, again, you're building the framework and then crowdsourcing the filling in of the details, which is, I think, a brilliant way to scale your business. But I do want to hear, what are those 4 pillars as someone's thinking about this, just in general? What are those 4 pillars that you guys have found to be so instrumental?
Yeah. So again, a lot of it comes from the community science out there. So one is membership, this idea of I need to feel like I'm part of something. So the more tight you can bound that membership. So being part of a property, great. So you live at 101 Main Street, being part of the 101 Main Street foodies or the 101 Main Street book clubs, the more boundaries you can kind of create that makes it specific, the higher the sense of membership.
Mm.
Through shared experiences. So this, Sam, you mentioned a couple of them earlier, like events you guys might be doing, just ways to engage, bringing people together. It could be something as simple as a grab and go. It's a type of shared experience.
Yeah.
Number 2, 3 is needs fulfillment. A community has to fulfill a need for you. So obviously in the properties we're serving, there's, shelter, right? That's being fulfilled. But even something as simple as, hey, I'm looking for a recommended tailor in the neighborhood. Hey, I'm looking for a recommended place to take, friends or loved ones that are visiting in town. So needs fulfillment is typically how most people start to engage with their community. And the 4th is mutual influence, which is I can make my community better. My community can make me better. So this is really enabling residents to help shape their experience. So whether it's getting feedback, you guys are doing a value add, CapEx project on a new amenity space, or just soliciting ways to make the community stronger and a better resident experience. So those are typically the 4 that we'll focus on.
Yeah, and I would think, like you said, on the mutual influence side of things, that's a great way. And correct me if I'm wrong here, because I haven't actually used your platform, but it would be a great way for property owners to then find out what residents want, like you said, and kind of playing off what, I mean, am I hearing that right? Where they can come back and say, hey, we're going to put in, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up here because this probably doesn't make any sense for most communities. We're going to put in putt-putt golf in some other amenity. And they're like, no, none of us like putt-putt golf, and, maybe a hot tub would be better. I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas.
Yeah,
Is that kind of right?
To validate. Absolutely. It's a great way to validate CapEx projects and kind of validate that, hey, I'm going to spend 5,000, 10,000 on, a covered dog park, right? Which sounds like a great amenity, but do residents actually want something as cheap as some additional benches, right? It's a great way to not only get that insight and helps you make a better, more informed investment decision, but on top of that, it also helps kind of, frankly, gain some trust and kind of gain some buy-in from the property residents that, call that place home, right? So you kind of win both ways in that way.
Right, because maybe nobody wants a covered dog park. Maybe they want to be out in the sunlight when they're walking their dog and let their dog play. Who knows? Who
Yeah,
knows?
the more data and information that you get, like what are people actually engaging around, the more you're able to make informed decisions.
Yeah. No, I think that's really, really cool. How do you guys even? I mean, I wouldn't even know how to monetize this. Obviously, I haven't because this is not my business. But like, you go to a community, say, like, how do you charge for it? How did you get your? Because it seemed like that would be been a big part of your kind of building the platform dilemma. Is like, what's this worth to a 300 unit apartment complex?
Yeah. So typically, I mean, like the main drivers of value, so to speak, are retention, right? So we're typically seeing
Yeah.
residents that engage with Cobu are renewing at somewhere between 10 to 17 percentage points higher renewal outcomes compared to those residents in the same property that don't. So there's kind of that retention benefit that you typically see in time and time again when we do that in stabilized communities and lease ups, we kind of see that outcome. The second piece is around driving Google reviews. So when we have a really strong engaged community, obviously online reputation is really important. That's where residents or prospects are looking before signing a lease. And often in your properties, you can actually generate a pretty significant amount of Google reviews, and Cobu does that through our platform just by asking kind of the engaged, happy residents at the right moments in time. Those are kind of two of the three, I would say, components that we typically focus on. Obviously, there are other ways to drive value in terms of information, kind of giving kind of the data that we spoke about earlier. But in terms of like what the cost of the platform is, typically somewhere between 300 to about 600 per property per month is the rough average. It depends on the size of the portfolio. It obviously depends on the size of the property, but that's kind of the typical range that you see.
Right, which is probably less than the cost of one turnover, maybe
Basically,
two.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And if you can do a 200 unit property at 10% of that, higher retention rate, that's 20 units a year that aren't turning over. It seems
Correct.
to make a lot of sense pretty quickly.
Correct.
So that's really, really cool. What have been some of the challenges maybe that you have faced, and how have you overcome them as it pertains to growing Cobu and taking it really all across the country?
Yeah, I would say like the first challenge was like, how do we build community at scale, right? So we spoke a lot about kind of the early learning, like how do we actually do that? I would say that that's not easy, right? The
No.
second piece that we face is like, how do we moderate community in a way that makes sense for residents? That's an experience that they're excited about, but also something that actually can exist in the context of where people live, right? There are obviously a bunch of hot button issues that residents might want to bring up that Code was obviously not meant for, right? Like, Cobu was not a space for residents to complain about their property. Cobu was not a space to use profanity. Cobu was not a place to, have a rent revolt, if you will. Like all these things are clearly not like what we've built the platform for. We've really built it to enable residents to kind of feel that sense of belonging and that sense of connection with their neighbors. So that definitely took a lot of time for us to kind of develop and learn into. And we've kind of developed this really sophisticated platform that uses AI and natural language processing, as well as a team of humans to do that. So I would say that was definitely an important piece that is really important for multifamily context in particular, right? How do we get the moderation right? And that definitely took a lot of time and thought and process. In terms of expanding, Sam, most of our growth, 60% plus, has come from current customers that bring us to more parts of their portfolios. That kind of like land and expand model, start with 3 to 5 properties, 10 properties, and then kind of continue growing within once you show success has really been where we focus. So we really haven't spent a significant amount of resource in like marketing. A lot of it's really been, internal growth with companies that we're working with, as well as word of mouth. It's a very relationship driven industry. And we love kind of earning the business, showing the value, and then kind of growing from there.
How about scaling a team that is not, been talking all day long here. Golly, can't even think here, Ben. But scaling a team that's not, you guys aren't all right there in Boston. You guys are across the country. What's that process been like for you? What's the word I'm looking for? Not a scattered team,
like a distributed team.
Hey, distributed. Thank you. Golly, man, I can't think today. Like I said, yes. What's it been like, that process of scaling a distributed team? Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, obviously it's interesting. Like we're kind of spread out across, I think, 8 states at this point. I think a lot of it just forces you to be a lot more intentional around culture, around kind of hiring for the people that share your values with you, that will kind of add to your culture. We always think about that as more of a culture add than a culture fit. It's not like, hey, who will fit our cultures? Hey, who will like push and advance and kind of make our culture stronger? I think a lot of it's just being really thoughtful around having regular check-ins, kind of frequency of interactions among your team. We try to obviously spend time in person. We had inaugural event. This was around Labor Day, which was an amazing time just to come together in person. So obviously in person is an important component of that, but look, we're a community building company. Our name Cobu literally stands for community building. That's what we do for properties, but the most important community that we're building is the one here at Cobu. So
Right.
yeah, taking a bunch of process learning or always trying to get better at it. I would say by no means, Sam, are we perfect in that area, but that's critical, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, or so they say, and it's really true.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely believe that. What about you personally as a co-founder and then leader of the company? What are some things you feel like you've done really well that other people should emulate when they are looking to scale?
The tough one, Sam. I would say I think there's a lot that I could do it better, and I think I'm always trying to grow and learn as a leader. I think kind of sticking true to the North Star, I think, is really important. I think there's so many opportunities out there, and there's always things that are presented to you. And I can't tell you the amount of times that different types of, hey, can you guys do this for that? Or hey, can you guys do it for this specific niche and segment? And it's always exciting because you always want to help. But I think focus is definitely really important. And, especially for teams that are growing and teams that, want to kind of be best in the world at what they're doing. I think focus and kind of saying no to things is sometimes more important than what you say yes to. So I would say, again, I don't think I've been perfect at that, but it's something I try to aspire to do better at. And I hope it's helpful to others too.
Yeah, man, we hear that all the time here on this show. And I think you're probably the fourth or fifth person today that's told me that. It's like, focus, you've got to focus. And because I think as entrepreneurs, our challenge is that we just see everything as opportunity. It's like, oh, look at that opportunity. It's like, no, maybe that's just a distraction instead.
Yeah, it's a great framework, the good to great framework that talks about this idea of like the hedgehog principle. It's like, what is something you can actually be uniquely best in the world at? What drives your economic engine? And I think the question of like, what can you actually be best in the world at is an important one, right? Because if you can't really excel and be best in the world at that, I think it's an important question to say, hey, should we focus elsewhere, or should the focus be more narrow, right? And I think sometimes a narrow focus gives you the opportunity to go really deep and be really, really strong, kind of, again, best in the world at something, rather than like going really wide in a bunch of specific, other areas that maybe you're not best equipped to be in.
Yep. No, I love it. Absolutely love it. Ben, this has been incredibly insightful. I love the way you guys have thought through Cobu, how you're building it, the need that you're serving in the industry, how it benefits owners, and also benefits your residents. I think that's something that, and I talked to somebody else about this again earlier today. It was just like, what is the right way to make the resident landlord property owner relationship? How do you improve that? And it sounds like you guys are really working towards that end, making it a more meaningful experience for the people that live in the communities that we own. So appreciate what you're doing and how you guys are putting that out there and really making a difference on that front. Certainly appreciate that. Ben, if our listeners want to get in touch with you and or learn more about Cobu, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. Our website is livecobu.com. So LIVECOBU.com. My email is just ben@livecobu.com if you want to ask questions directly, and definitely happy to share more and see if we may be able to help some of your portfolios.
Sounds great. Ben, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Hey, thanks for listening to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate podcast. If you can do me a favor and subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever platform it is you use to listen, if you can do that for us, that would be a fantastic help to the show. It helps us both attract new listeners as well as rank higher on those directories. So appreciate you listening. Thanks so much and hope to catch you on the next episode.